Well, thanks very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to be here. I really endorse many of the things that Bruce has just said to you, but I'm going to take a bit of a trip sort of upstairs looking across the nation. So Arcana Capital will be presenting later on this afternoon just after 4. So I'm not really talking about my firm at the moment, but I'll be talking about, again, the trends and the environment in Australia right now in property. So firstly, why invest in Australia? So this is the sales pitch. I'm also going to tell you the what's and all side of it as well. We do have a great legal system. These are international rankings from independent reports. It's a large economy. We have the 2032 Brisbane Olympics, which is a great story for Brisbane particularly. Bureaucracy is stable and clean, if I can call it that. A high median wealth per adult, and in the JLL World Rankings of Transparency, we're coming in number 4 behind United States, UK and France. The big message though is the Australian population growth. Currently sitting at about 26.5 million. By 2063, 40.5 million. In a 12-month period at the moment, Australia's population is going to grow by 400,000 people. Big public policy issue at the moment. It's causing great stresses and strains in the residential property market, but it is great for investors in terms of commercial property. Another thing to consider if you're a Singaporean investor is this chart. I remember as a youngster coming here back in the 80s, as a young army officer, seeing my friends here in the Singapore Defence Force. And back in those days, I can tell you what, the exchange rate was a lot better for an Australian. But what I'm trying to say here is the foreign exchange is going to work at the current time quite well for Singapore-based investors. There is quite a play on the exchange rate as that dynamic changes in the future. What's going on across the nation in the climate? What's the climate? Well, the RBA, our central bank, has put up rates by 400 basis points in a very short period of time, but they are getting some real success now in terms of beating inflation. The most recent numbers that came out yesterday had inflation down to 4.9 from as high as 7%. So it's now looking like there really is going to be a halt to those interest rate rises. They seem to have got it under control. There's the level of transactions. It's off the boil. It has been lower than in the period 2020, 2021. There is still plenty of foreign investment coming in. And there's the performance of the unlisted commercial real estate entities from publicly listed information. And that's compared to the real estate investment trusts. My big point here, though, is because of those interest rate rises, all asset classes have come off the boil. Cap rates have softened to varying degrees across different sectors within commercial real estate. The greatest softening has been in commercial office. I'll speak about that a bit more in a moment. That's one of my key take-homes for you. What's affecting the office, though, is sentiment, and particularly CBDs are being affected, and it's due to, I think, the major corporates and government bureaucracies being the sort of organisations that have had difficulty getting people to come back to work. Literally, our HR and IR policies in Australia have made it hard for the larger enterprises to actually get people back. There is therefore plenty of spare office desks around the place in our CBDs, and that has given rise to a requirement for less space. But that sentiment is right across the sector. Going back to what Bruce was just telling you from Stronghold before, that's where there will be opportunities. I'll come back to it. Industrial logistics, some softening of cap rates, but high rental growth expected. And in retail, it's a bit steady as she goes. Some areas have softened, some areas are tight and remain tight, quite remarkably so. So what I wanted to do here very quickly is give you my take on the biggest opportunities for investors in commercial property in Australia at the current time. The first one is the REITs. Now, don't take it the way I've put it up there. That's a little bit premature, the way I'm pitching that to you. What I'm saying to you, though, the REITs are in trouble. They are having to market assets at the moment, and there is probably more downside, but there is a time coming soon where the REITs will present great buying opportunities compared to where they were 2 or 3 years ago. So the patient investor, the discerning investor will monitor what's going on across the REITs in Australia, and when the timing is right, that's one to go for. Another way is to go in and look at the unlisted property trust. So this is where we are in Arcana Capital, or Stronghold, you've heard from Bruce before. And particularly that space has done quite well. And if I may say so humbly and respectfully, we've outperformed the big guys. We have attention to detail, we have focus. I'm talking across the offerings of various competing firms, but collectively we have that focus. We have that attention to detail that actually gets better value for investors. And if there is a qualifying entity being a managed investment trust, then Singapore investors, through the tax treaty and the like, are hit with a one-time 15% withholding tax on distributions being repatriated back to Singapore. And so that's the most beneficial place to be. But that really does depend on the product that the operator is developing. So you've got to look in and look at that. I'd also say, just amplifying what I've already mentioned about suburban office, this is a really big opportunity. Because of the negative sentiment, it's affected the whole, I suppose, of the office sector. The cap rates have softened by about 200, 250 basis points, and there now are fantastic buying opportunities. We, this year, have bought 3 suburban office buildings. The first 2 are fully occupied with a great mix of government and private sector tenants and strong firms, and no sign at all that those enterprises or organisations wish to downsize or vacate. As Bruce just told you, Bruce from Stronghold, it's about having great connectivity with the suburban road network, the motorway network. It's about having access to public transport, but particularly it's due to the amenity and car parking ratios. In the Brisbane CBD, the council will only let you build 1 car park per 200 square metres of lettable area, whereas out in places like 8 Mile Plains that he referred to, car park ratios of 1 to 35 square metres, 1 to 50 square metres, and so forth. So the fact that you can provide great car parking options for staff really is attractive to those SMEs. Another point that I'd like to make, though, before I close, is in relation to, I suppose, the philosophy of investors. I said Australia was a great investment environment. Yes, it is relative to other jurisdictions, but let me speak frankly with you this afternoon. Sadly, in the last 5 years, many Australian jurisdictions have seen offshore investors as a cash cow. And depending on the jurisdiction, there have been increases in taxes and charges, land tax, stamp duty, on offshore investors. And it is quite varied. So you do need local expertise and great advice from lawyers or real estate firms when you're making investment decisions. But I'd also pitch to you, and it is a bit self-serving, it's better to come in to invest alongside Australian investors. If the deal is structured the right way, with the level of interest, you can actually sidestep these higher imposts of land tax or stamp duty. You can also ensure that you get better outcomes in terms of foreign capital gains tax, withholding tax, which can be levied on individual overseas investors. So I'd really urge people, as a final strategy thing to think about, it is actually, whilst you don't have that control, if you seek the right partner, if I can put it that way, it's great to invest alongside Australians in the way that I've said. So thank you very much. I'll look forward to your attendance after 4 this afternoon when you'll hear about the Arcana Capital story. Thank you for having me.